You hear me okay? Everything good? Okay, well, good. Well, first of all, thank you very much for being here. It's a cool opportunity to get to do something like this and to chat with you all today. So I appreciate y'all. You're here at 5 o'clock on whatever today is, a Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm an executive advisor now, so I don't even remember what day of week it is typically. But you're here. And so that's something that I don't take lightly, and so I'm thankful that you're here. Thankful to spend a little bit of time with you, and I hope you find the session to be enjoyable. So thank you very much for being here. As Brian said, I'm Wally Deveraux. I'm an executive advisor at Southwest. I have been around there for quite a while, and I'll be retiring actually technically retiring at the end of March of next year. And so I'll pass 34 years with Southwest Airlines at the beginning of February coming up here next year. So I've been there quite a while, and I'll be retiring here at the end of March of next year. Um, my most recent role with Southwest, and I'll talk maybe a little bit about this today, was Vice President of Cargo. And cargo is a kind of a product, almost like an ancillary side product that we sell at Southwest Airlines to shippers. I don't know how many folks know this or not, but a lot of the commercial flights that move around the country that are passenger flights have cargo on them typically, like American, Delta, United, Southwest. We all move freight. In addition to the bags that are going with passengers, we move freight as well. And so what typically you'll see are things like organs for transplant or some sort of medical specimen, things like that that have to move really quickly, and where maybe tomorrow morning isn't fast enough, then you'll see those kinds of products that will wind up on commercial passenger carriers that can move them today as opposed to tomorrow because they have to move that fast. And so I was responsible for cargo, and I was also responsible for our provisioning department, which essentially is our catering business at Southwest. So we have, unlike maybe a lot of other carriers where you see companies like maybe Sky Chef or somebody like that that puts the food and the drinks on the flight. We actually do all of that in-house at Southwest. And so I was responsible for cargo, I was responsible for provisioning, and then I was responsible for our charters product as well. So we charter out a lot of flights to entities that need to charter an entire aircraft and fly those around the system on their schedule between markets that they have asked for. So U.S. military is a great example of that. They charter a lot of flights on commercial aircraft. And so had this really kind of unique career to be responsible for those kind of unique parts of Southwest Airlines. And they're parts of an airline that you don't necessarily even think about or know when you think about a commercial passenger airline. So really, really a fun and interesting career, and I'm very thankful for it. I know we introduced Allison over here. Allison's from our people department, and Allison may help me here in a little bit as we talk about internships and things like that. I also want to introduce somebody over here, and I'm just going to do this now. This fine gentleman over here, Dr. Curtis Williams, is a former Southwest Airlines employee as well, and we work together. And so, a great guy, going to be probably teaching some classes over in this building. You teach in Frisco now, right, primarily? Okay, and so you might be doing some stuff over here. So highly recommended if you have an opportunity to take a class with this gentleman in the future. But he and I both started in the same spot, actually, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So today, I thought it would be interesting to talk about a bit about my career. And when I think back, at least, and I was in your seat, you always wondered, how did somebody kind of get from here where I am or where you are today to maybe where my career is now ending, or somebody else that gets into more of a leadership type role within a company and something that you might aspire to be potentially. And so how does that happen? How does somebody, what does a career path even look like? And when I was sitting in your seat, 35-ish years ago, that was always a question for me because I really just didn't know how to even think about a career from start to finish. I just was really thinking about having to get a job. And so I thought it would be interesting to think of or to talk a little bit about that. I have a couple of maybe learnings along the way that I'd love to share as well, or a little bit of advice. And then Allison and I will talk a little bit about internships, resume building, and some interviewing techniques that could be helpful to you as well. And I'm going to try to cover all of this in this time window that we have. And then the most important thing, though, I want to make sure we get to is your questions. So I definitely want to answer your questions. So anything that you might have for me, we'll try to do that at the end. We'll try to save some time for that. But I'd love to try to answer any questions that you have. And then afterwards, Allison and I are going to be at the table right out front there for a bit too. So if you don't get a chance to ask it in here, feel free to come over there and ask it. And I'll certainly be happy to give you my opinion on whatever questions you might have, and Allison will as well. So I do want to preface all of this by saying these are just my opinions. And so you may have a completely different idea about some of the things that I'm going to tell you, and that is absolutely okay. And you might disagree with some of the things that I'm going to say, and that is absolutely okay as well. And you may have professors that kind of don't think about things exactly the same way I do, and that's okay too. So I'm just going to give you some things that I've learned based on my career at Southwest over the 33 plus years that I've been there. And they aren't right for everybody, but there's some thoughts and maybe food for thought that you can at least think about. So does that sound good? Sound like a plan? All right. Well, I'll start with me. I'm a local kid. I grew up in the Grapevine Colleyville area. Went to Grapevine High School back in the late 1980s. So I'm wondering if there are any Grapevine High School graduates in the house. Any Mustangs in the house? Not a. Oh, we have a Grapevine Mustang. Colleyville. Oh, well, that's where my daughters went. I'm so old they didn't have Colleyville Heritage when I was there. So, well, good, very good. We'll have to catch up afterwards. My daughters both went to Colleyville Heritage as well. And then I went locally to college. I went down to University of Texas at Arlington and got a degree in marketing back in December of 1991. So it took me 4.5 years to get my marketing degree back in 1991. And so, 30 to 35-ish years ago, I was sitting in your seat, and I really just, didn't kind of even know what to think about was really coming for me. And I remember at the time that the job market was pretty tight. And I think that might be something that y'all are going to find to be today. I don't know. It probably depends on the field and a lot of different things, but there is some talk that the job market is a little bit tighter today than it has been, and so you may find something similar to that. You may not. I didn't know, like I mentioned, not really how to think about a career. I'd never had an internship before, and I just thinking back on that, I'm not sure that internships at the time were as prevalent back then as they are today. But I think almost all of your majors now might require one, which is really a good thing because it does give you this opportunity to kind of see how companies tick and what, to visualize yourself within an organization, which I think is valuable too. So, but I had never done an internship, and at the time, every job that I had ever had had a name tag. So I worked at Pizza Inn and I had a name tag, and I worked at the Hilton and I had a name tag. And I worked at this little tennis shop over in the HEB area, and I had a name tag. So everything that I had ever done, I had a name tag. And at this point, I knew that it's time to get a job. And so we had a student placement program at UTA, and I don't remember it being a really robust program, but we did have one. And so I applied for several positions, and I got an interview with one company. And before I tell you the story about this, by the way, universities today provide a lot of resources around things like that, career fairs and postings of positions that are available to students and companies that are recruiting students. And so if you're not using those things that you have available to you today, you're making a mistake. Because there are some great resources today that are available to you to help you, navigate that next step. So use every resource that's available to you. And if you don't, it is a mistake. Your peers are going to use those resources, and they're going to get jobs because of them. So make sure you utilize what you have. But at the time for me, I interviewed with one company, and it was Glidden Paint Company. And the position actually was to sell paint. So I had just graduated, or about to graduate, and I really never envisioned myself as the next step in my career was going to be to sell paint. But I had one interview, and so I figured I better go ahead and take it. And so I had a nice conversation with a recruiter from Glidden Paint Company, and everything was going well. And along the way, he asked me if I would be willing to relocate. And so I tried to inject a little humor into the conversation, and I told him, I said, well, sure, as long as it's not someplace like Cleveland or something. And I was just trying to be funny, and he looked at me like I was crazy, and read off my little mission statement that I had on my resume to say, well, Wally, if you want to be a high-level blah, blah, blah with Glidden Paint Company someday, you're going to have to move to Cleveland because that's where our corporate headquarters is. So I was sitting there thinking to myself, what are the chances of that happening? But obviously I didn't get that job. And so I had blown the one chance that I had to get a position coming out of college through the student placement program. So maybe another lesson in this conversation today is do a little preparation. If you're going to interview for something, go ahead and prepare. And we'll talk about that here in a bit too, but be prepared. Prepare for the things that you really want. If you don't prepare for those things, then just expect that the likelihood is you may not get what you really want. And so if you really want it, put the work in ahead of it. And then if you don't get it, you still know that you did the work in advance. And so you can be proud of that, and you can move forward on with the next opportunity. But I didn't prepare. I didn't get the job with Glidden Paint Company, thankfully. And so I had applied for a few other positions, and I ended up with a job at Southwest Airlines. And so my first job with Southwest was as a customer service agent at Love Field. And so Curtis started as a customer service agent in San Diego, right? I started as a customer service agent at Love Field. Allison started in the airport, but not as a customer service agent, but in an administrative role. Oh, okay, corporate position, but helping with the station administrative side, right? Okay. So we all kind of had these interesting starting points, but mine was as a customer service agent at Love Field. And so I was making $6.35 an hour as a customer service agent. I was working shift work, so I would work 5 a.m. shift in the morning, or I might finish my shift at 2:30 a.m. or 3 a.m. In the morning. So, and I was working weekends. I was getting yelled at. It was not this idea that I had that this was going to be my career after going to college and getting my degree. I just didn't envision being yelled at the airport and making $6.35 an hour. I was having a hard time paying rent. In fact, I thought to myself, well, I'm going to have to get another job to kind of figure out how to pay for things. And so I went and got my insurance license to sell life insurance. I went and got a license to sell like 529 plans and that kind of thing. I did all of that stuff for a while, and I just thought that Southwest would have to be a temporary stop for me. It just didn't seem like it was going to be some sort of a long-term opportunity. And so now, today, almost 34 years later, I'm still there, and it's kind of hard to believe that that's the way that this has worked out. But I have a few thoughts on some different things over the years that I wanted to share with you, and that's kind of my path. And I'll talk about a few of the stops I've had at Southwest along the way as well. So, first job, customer service agent. It was a humbling position for me, but I think in looking back on it, it probably was the best single thing that could have happened to me, and I would have never told you that at the time. But what that job gave me the opportunity to do was really to learn about the frontline operations at Southwest Airlines. So I got to see exactly how we operated. I got to see exactly and be a part of exactly what the customer bought from Southwest, what the customer experience was like at Southwest. So what at our core, I was a part of this operation, and I was a part of seeing what customers got to see and feel when they were using Southwest Airlines. And that ended up being experience for me that I used my entire career. And so I was, once you kind of have that, you're able to add an operational perspective to a lot of decisions that you're forced to make over your career that may or typically do deal with the airport operation. And a lot of times you'll find folks that maybe don't have that background. And so that was something that was highly, highly beneficial for me. And that is really the first point that I want to make. And so you can think about this a lot of different ways, but coming out of college, you obviously want to try to get the best position that you can get and the highest paying position that you can find. But it may make sense to at least consider opportunities that are what would be considered to be more starting level roles in organizations, especially if they're highly desirable, especially if they're highly competitive to get into. It may be worth still considering that as a path. And that's what a lot of people at Southwest Airlines have done. They get their degrees, they get a job at the airport, or they get a job in customer relations, and then they would begin their career that way versus trying to get in to Southwest Airlines in a much higher role, because typically it just didn't happen. And so that was something that was really a blessing in disguise for me. And I'll tell you, and I didn't know Curtis was going to be here today, but Curtis is a great example of this as well. Curtis had an aviation management degree, got a job as a customer service agent at Love Field. Now 30 years later, retired from Southwest, and now you're Dr. Curtis Williams. I mean, just an amazing career. Started as a customer service agent with a degree. Started, as a customer service agent with a degree. Allison started in an entry-level position as well. And so you have it's worth considering it as an option, especially if it's a company that you really want to work for. And then what you find when you're there in those roles is you get this valuable frontline experience. You become then an internal candidate for other opportunities. And a lot of times companies have management programs and things like that for folks that are in entry-level positions that also have a degree. And so you find a path in a company that way versus trying to start somewhere much higher up the food chain. Yes?
Being told you're overqualified for those positions, especially when they're drying up due to AI taking over so many of them?
Well, I mean, I'll just speak to my kind of particular area, but AI is not really taking over the customer service function in the airport environment at this point. You see more self-service type opportunities, but you still see a lot of demand for customer service related positions. And so I think in the case, and again, I'll speak just very specific to my world. In the case of Southwest, it's just not uncommon for you to find folks with degrees that are trying to start in the airport operation. It's just not an uncommon finding. So you really don't have to overcome this objection that you're overly qualified. You have people that are in all kind of points in their career that maybe have gone into a role, retired, that have run a business in the past, but that want to come back and work in the airport environment for whatever reason. And so I don't think that's an objection that you necessarily face when you're trying to get that kind of role at Southwest. So I think, point number one here that I want to make is just that you consider all of your options. And maybe the worst thing that can happen is if you start in a job like that at Southwest, you spend 6 months there, you can still look for other positions at other places. Or you can do what I did. You can go get your insurance license and sell insurance for a while, and then you still might find that you're in the right place, you've done the right thing, and now you have a career path that can develop internally in a company as opposed from looking from the outside in. So, and that's the way it worked for me. So, customer service agent. After I got into Southwest, after about a year, I got my first kind of career opportunity in a leadership role as a supervisor. And I'm not necessarily going to talk about that today, but things started to happen a little more quickly for me because of the fact that I was working there. So, I spent some time as a supervisor for a while, and that was a humbling experience in the airport as well. And then after that, after several years of being in the airport, I got a job in what amounted to our media relations department. So that was also known as public relations at the time. in more of an administrative role. But that was kind of my first move over into more of a corporate, what you'd consider to be a corporate position. That group was very closely associated with the marketing department, and I had a marketing degree. And so a year later, I actually got into the marketing department. And so then, I thought, well, okay, this is what I went to school for. This is what I absolutely want to do. Everything starts now. This is when my career really starts to develop, and I get to do exactly what I had always intended to do and hoped to do, and now I have this opportunity there. And I spent several years in the marketing side, and what I ended up finding is that I really liked it. And as time went on, I didn't quite like it as much, but I liked it. But I didn't love it. I didn't love being in the marketing department. And nothing against our marketing department. I think we have a great marketing department. But as time went on, I just found that it really maybe wasn't the best stop for me. And so I started to look for other things. And oddly enough, what I really started to look for was back towards the operational side of things. I just really enjoyed the very tangible, kind of tactical nature of being part of the operation. So I started to look for positions that kind of filled that need for me, and I ended up finding one in the cargo department. So cargo was this kind of small, very unique, almost standalone business that had operational aspects to it, had commercial aspects to it. Curtis was there. He helped me a lot, and we got to work together. But I found this role in the cargo department, and I fell in love with it. I loved what we did. I loved why we did it. I loved the idea that we were helping moving things like organs for transplant and other things. I took a lot of pride in that, and I just found a home. And I spent 25 years in that part of it, along with obviously a few other things along the way. But so I think that my next point here to consider, at least, is that it's hard sitting in your seat today to decide what you want to do 20 years from now. So you've chosen a degree, and then you're going to get a job in that degree field. Very likely that's where you'll start, or you might start in more of an entry-level position and work your way into that. But then at some point you may decide that maybe you want to do something different, and I would tell you to be open to that. Your degree is a necessity. You have to have it. And that degree opens all of the doors, especially initially. It opens a lot of doors initially. But then after that, those doors are open and you start to gain some more practical experience in a working environment, then you can do different things. And so for me, that degree opened some doors initially. I wound up back in more of an operational department. And oddly enough, a lot of the people that I worked with had degrees from different areas as well. So I worked with English majors, I worked with engineering majors, I worked with psychology majors, all kinds of different folks. And they were all kind of, had a similar story. It's that they got their degree in something that they thought they wanted to do at the time, but then over time that changed a bit. And so they chose to make a change in direction, go a little different direction, and a little different career. And so I think, too, if you actually look up a lot of executive profiles, let's say, for example, on LinkedIn, you will find a lot of them have degrees that aren't necessarily related to where they are today, and that's very common. And so don't get, I guess my advice here is to not get boxed into the idea that your degree has to define exactly what path you're going to take for the rest of your career. Because you got to think about that degree as a starting point and a way to get in, and a way to do some things that you really want to do, and it's necessary to play, but then you can change along the way and be open to other paths. And that's the way it worked for me. I know it's the way that it worked for you, and so I would just go in with the idea that could also happen to you. Number 3, I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you here, and I would tell you this bit of advice is maybe the most important thing that I did over my time at Southwest Airlines, and I'm not sure how I got in the habit necessarily of doing this, but this practice became very valuable to me and taught me a lot of lessons along the way, and that was just I started to really, you go to training programs and things like that, and you learn about that. You learn about the the jobs itself, and you learn how to do those things. But the thing that is not necessarily uh, a classroom environment, but every time I had a leader or got to work with a leader or saw a leader in a certain area that I thought was really effective, I just started to try to figure out what are the things that those individuals do really well. And then the idea being that, I hope that one day I can do that as well as they do that. And then the flip side of that is, I'd have leaders, whether they reported to me or I reported to them, that you'd look at their skill set and say, that's a quality that I hope I never do. And I would make a note of those things as well. And so I always tried to figure out what are the things that I see from the people that are really moving up and being successful in leadership roles at Southwest Airlines. What are those things that those folks are doing really well, and how can I try to model those same types of behaviors or get that experience or become good at those things? And so I'll give you an example of that. So the one thing that I always noticed was that typically the leaders that I saw at Southwest Airlines, especially as they kind of worked their way up the food chain a bit, were always really good, effective presenters. So they were always excellent at that. And so that was a skill that I always wanted to have. And you may walk away from this today, by the way, and say, he wasn't very good. And that's okay. But that was always a skill that I wanted to learn, was to try to become good at presenting, because I felt like every leader that I ever saw that was really effective had that skill. And that's something that I aspired to do. And so I just made it a point throughout my career to try to find those opportunities to allow me to do that. And so anytime anybody ever asked if you would give an update on this or present on this, I always said yes. And most of the time I regretted it. I didn't really want to do it. I didn't want to put the work in beforehand. I didn't, it would make you nervous beforehand doing it, and you have to do all of this preparation. So most of the time I regretted saying yes, but it just I constantly put myself out in that environment to try to become better at it, or at least more comfortable with it. And I did. I became at least more comfortable with that skill over time. And during those years, sometimes I felt like I had, I'd always reflect on how I did. And some of those presentations I felt like went really well over the years. And I could tell you some of them were absolute disasters. But those disasters were also this great learning experience too. And so, for me, it was kind of find ways to put yourself in the fire or in under pressure to try to improve your skill set, and just be deliberate about that, and be okay with not being great at it, especially as you're learning. And so whether it was presenting or something else, I've always tried to say yes to the kinds of things that made me uncomfortable. And then that just helps you improve your skill set over time. And I think it was something that really was helpful to me. But as I would do this over the years, I observed a lot of other qualities. I was using presenting as an example, but you would observe other things. And so I would observe qualities like business acumen and analytical thinking and strategic thinking and those kinds of things that you would expect a good leader would be very competent at. And you found, I would always kind of find those things. But the other thing that I found very regularly, the other skill that I found on a very regular basis, almost all the time, is you find that leaders at least at a certain level have a very good or are very good at soft skills. So they're very good, excellent leaders, I think, are very good on the emotional intelligence side of things. They're very good with self-awareness. They're very good at understanding how they're making you feel. They're very good at understanding how their words are making you feel. And so you start to see that leaders have excellent soft skills. Soft skills is not typically something that I think you necessarily get a lot of training on. I know you probably get some of it. I don't honestly know, but soft skills are a great differentiator. And I'll narrow that down to just conversational skills. I've interviewed a lot of people over my many, many years there. And I have interviewed a lot of folks just like you all that are trying to get a job with Southwest, that are new, that are coming out of college or, relatively new in their career. And I find on a pretty regular basis that you have folks that look wonderful on paper. They have incredible resumes, but their soft skills, they're just if you just narrow it down to just conversational skills, which is a soft skill, their conversational skills are just not capable of 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 having a conversation with you. They are not capable of convincing you, persuading you. They're not capable of asking conversational, open-ended questions. They're not capable of kind of putting their thoughts together in a way that really helps to sell their story. And so, if I could encourage you to as you kind of wrap up your time here or spend the remaining years that you have here, something that if you don't have opportunities to do this in your class, you need to find them, and that is to work on your soft skills, particularly your conversational skills. Conversational skills will be the thing that will oftentimes be the reason why you don't get a job or the reason why you don't get a promotion. It just will be. You're going to sit next to somebody, and you may be sitting next to them now, and you're going to have very similar resumes, and that person's going to be able to tell me why they should hire that person and convince me, and the other person just is not. And a lot of that just has to do with being conversational. And so that is something to focus on. And if I could give you one bit of advice around that, I would say look for networking opportunities. I imagine UNT provides a lot of them. And here's what I would say about networking opportunities: they kind of suck. They're not that much fun. There are people that you've never met. They can be really awkward. Sometimes, people don't want to talk to you. That is the perfect environment to put yourself in, because it makes you comfortable with that. It helps you to become comfortable with awkward conversations or with kind of leading a conversation. So I imagine, Brian, y'all have tons of networking opportunities here for students to take advantage of in all kinds of different areas. And you don't have to attend every single one of them, but set a goal to attend a few of them every semester and set some goals for those particular networking opportunities. Go in there and say, hey, my goal is to meet 5 people, and and with those 5 people, I'm gonna ask them both a couple of open-ended questions. Can you tell me about, can you give me some advice for a new person that's coming into the job market based on your experience? And let them talk. Ask those kinds of questions, not like, hey, do you like it here or not? But tell me about this, or please give me some advice, or can you tell me about why you like working at your company? Those kinds of things. Just have a couple of them. A couple of questions in the box that you ask and you're going to meet with 5 people. It's that easy. And once you've met with your 5, walk away from it and be done with it. But learn to go into that environment and learn to be conversational in that environment in front of people that you don't know, that don't necessarily act like they at least want to talk with you. But become good with that, and that will be a skill that will help you your entire career. I promise you. It will help you get the job the first time. It will help you get the next job. It'll help you get the promotion, because you're good at doing that, because you're convincing and you can be persuasive and you can have a conversation with somebody. And folks do struggle with that, and it's just a reality. So that would be my 2 cents there. So I think I've kind of covered a lot of the things that I wanted to cover before we jump into, how much time do I have left here? 23 minutes or 13 minutes. No, I want to make sure we cover some on internships and other things like that. Any quick questions before? Well, we'll save the questions for the end, and I'll jump over to these slides here. But and Allison, I'm gonna have you help me some too. So Southwest Airlines has an internship program, and it's a pretty cool program. we offer internships in all kinds of different departments across the company, and this is just a handful of them. So what you don't see on there, for example, is cargo, but we do have an internship program in cargo and many other areas. But the internships are a lot of fun. We have a lot of interns that come in. They get to fly for free. They get paid. I think it's somewhere around 20 to 23 bucks an hour or something in that neighborhood. Yeah, it's money. So you're getting paid. You're getting to fly for free during the time that you're an internship. You're an intern with us. So we have a lot of folks that they come in. They meet with other interns. They form travel clubs, and then every single weekend they fly out of town somewhere as a group, and then they fly back for work on Monday. So it's a really cool program. This is a good, I think, view of some of the dates. So now on the left-hand side, unfortunately today is October 15th. So what's available on the technology and the revenue management side is probably 11:59. So if you do go back and find something, you might take a look. But otherwise, a lot of the internships that become available will be posted early in January, and those will be for the spring and summer program. Is that right? Oh, that'll be for the following spring. Okay. Okay. So, but I'm going to show you a slide here. If you want to scan that, it'll take you to a page where you can put your information down and you can learn about all of the different internship programs that will be available. So I definitely, yep.
Full campaign to you before the job post. It helps you be a passive candidate for positions that are becoming available to you versus you constantly having to search career sites. So this is good to know, and you can also click around and find out either about internships or early careers for some of you guys who will be graduating soon. Yeah.
Yep. So very good. Did y'all get that? Everybody get it that wanted to scan it? Yes, sir. Are we accepting resumes for hiring post after? Absolutely, we're always accepting resumes. So this site, does this take you to the career site? Yeah.
Profile, and you can put your resume there, always be adding an updated resume. If you have that profile built out, it makes applying to a position or internship a lot quicker. And it is good advice to get your application in ASAP. We interview first in, first out. Well, resume review first in, first out. So if we have 200 applicants, we might pull the first 50 for phone interviews and just kind of dwindle it down from there based on head count.
Yeah. So this site it'll show you anything that's posted by location, by different departments as well. So it's a really useful way to take a look at and I think, for example, revenue management has a program where they really recruit right into folks right before they're graduating to see if they might be a good fit for that particular role, right?
Section of the career page up at the top, you'll go to programs, early careers, and you can read all about the revenue management program.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm going to jump over. So Allison sent me a bunch of slides here. I pulled a few of them out that I thought were relevant. She's going to help me here as well. But we'll talk a little bit about your resume, just some tips and pointers on the resume side of things. So I thought this was an interesting point. 7 seconds is the average time that a recruiter spends looking at your resume. Does that surprise you? Seems pretty short, but that's about it. 7 seconds. So your 3 goals that you should have with a resume are to make it easy, to make it relevant, to make it clear. Anything that you would add to that? Keywords.
Bill, there, because I'm not an expert in revenue management, but my hiring leader is, and I did an intake with them where I'm learning about the job and hearing those keywords. That's what I'm going to be looking for, as well as past positions. So just make it really easy to read, because I probably have 100 to look through, and I'll spend more than 7 seconds with the one that I say, I know some of these words. So, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always think about too, from a resume standpoint, it's really like you got to think of it as kind of a living document. So you don't do your resume once. You tailor your resume for the position that you're applying for. And just to Allison's point, there are certain keywords you look in the job description for the position that you're applying for, and you make sure that you call out the relevant experience that you have that might fit with some of those keywords in that job description. So it's not about being dishonest. It's about saying, okay, I've done this, this, and this, but in my resume right now, you wouldn't clearly see that. And so you need to make sure that every time you apply for a position in general, make sure that the resume that you're using is in some sort of alignment with that job description. That will greatly improve your chances of at least getting a conversation. And let's see here, some other just quick points here. So showcase your accomplishments, try to maintain a resume to 1 page. A lot of times you'll see resumes nowadays that could be up to 3 pages long. That might be a little bit long. So if you can narrow it down to 1 page, that's always preferred. List relevant class projects until you have more professional experience. So you guys do all of these amazing things in a lot of your different classes. Well, take what those things are and talk about those on a resume versus, if you don't have a job or something like that that aligns well with that, if you've done some project work that really does, make sure you talk about those kinds of things on that resume. And then campus involvement, non-internship experience, tailor non-internship experience to the role that you want. It's kind of what we were talking about there. But let's see. Any questions on the resume side of things? I know this is rather quick, and feel free. I know some of you are taking pictures of this, but feel free to do that. No. Probably. Maybe you, probably not me. Okay, so a couple of just very briefly interview tricks here too. So prepare. I talked a little bit about this, and you saw what happened to me when I didn't prepare. But this is almost the sequence that you should think about when you're preparing for an interview. So you prepare for it, do a little bit of research, you practice it, and then you perform it. And so you get comfortable with answering certain questions that you think even might come up in an interview environment. And so when you think about preparing, these are now, in my defense, we didn't have the internet when I was, applying at Glidden Paint Company, but do a little research, figure out where companies are located, figure out kind of what they stand for, it's always good to look at a company's values and things like that to make sure that you understand what those are. And I think it's always impressive to me, at least, when somebody walks in and they can tell you a little bit about what you do and what you're about, and that it's obvious that they've taken time to do exactly that they've taken time to prepare. So I always find that valuable.
I think some of the best fun facts about Southwest in interviews, they'll come and I'll learn something new. I'll say, so our emails end with WNCO. Airlines have identifiers. Southwest, you think our identifier would be SW, but it's WN. And I learned in an interview, our identifier is WN, SW is taken, but it's WN because Colleen Barrett, one of our founders, loves Willie Nelson. And that is it.
That's right. So when you send me an email to WNCO.com, it's like, why am I sending it to this? That's why. Let's see here. Practice. So you will be asked to give examples. Always be prepared to give examples describing the experiences that you may reference on your resume. So be prepared to give examples and tell stories about things that you think would be good stories to tell. Kind of goes back to that idea of knowing how to be conversational and persuasive. Figure out, when you're preparing and you're practicing, it's always good to think about what maybe some potential questions could be, and then to actually do a little bit of work in advance and figure out how you might answer those. So that's always a recommended practice.
Something that just happened.
Yep.
If you have a situation that happens in a project or at work, I keep a living document of my accomplishments, but also good interview examples. I don't plan to leave Southwest, but who knows, I could keep blowing up, maybe shift teams, but having those relevant examples you can think of and practice versus trying to think of something in the interview room where maybe you're spending 5 seconds like, oh gosh, tell me about a time I had conflict with a coworker. You can just have that conflict, write it down. and think about how to best prepare for it. We do use the STAR method, a lot of the tell me about a time, so we do want examples of that relevant experience. So keep a living document of things that you can refer to when you're preparing for an interview.
And can you talk about the STAR method a little more? Just do you remember I don't remember.
To the quick question, because it's always asked, it's not a ha, got you, you're a red flag. It's more, we will encounter conflict in our professional careers. It's unavoidable. It's a matter of, and the best way for me to explain STAR is through this example, is we just want to hear what was the incident, what part did you plan, how did you recover, and what did you learn from it? So it's just talking about the situation, your part, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the Google machine also helps to break it down a little bit better. But it's basically just behavioral interview questions is what the STAR method comes from.
And I will tell you this too, the answer, no matter what the question is, the answer never is to blame somebody else. Never do that. Right? And then finally, just some other, bits of advice here. Maintain good etiquette, arrive early, log in early. Confident but humble is always a good approach. It's okay to ask for clarification with questions that you might be asked, and sometimes that's a perfect strategy for giving you a little more time to figure out how you want to answer the question. Ask. I always have a few questions in the bag if I'm going to, or when I talk to my daughter in particular, if she's interviewing for something, I'll always encourage her to have a couple of questions to think about that she could ask the recruiter. Recent and relevant examples are good. And then avoid telling stories or using negative examples. For example, I tell you a story and then I blame somebody for the problem. So that's never a good result. Yes.
Alternative to that, an experience where one of my coworkers was sued for almost killing someone, and having to navigate that was a really interesting negative experience there.
Tell us more. Tell us more.
Yeah.
So navigating the legal process there and understanding how to be respectful and manage that.
Yeah. So are you, I mean, that's a pretty, that was brought up in an interview? Wow. So yeah, that's an interesting one. We may have to talk more about that at the table out here.
Top Gun came out, everybody was getting mustaches. Anyways, this candidate was mid answering question and his mustache falls off. That's all I'm gonna say.
So last slide, I think, here, and then we'll wrap up and we can open it up for a few questions. And I think we're almost right on time, right? So sorry. Tell stories. That's a great thing to do. Don't bash. Don't chew gum. Don't cuss. Don't stink. So those are some examples that it's always good to think about. And so we'll just leave it at that. So I think I'm right on time. So why don't we do this? If you do have questions and you'd like to bring those up, please stop by the table afterwards. Other than that, I'm glad to have a chance to chat with you. So thank you.